Welcome back to PCW, where today we are reviewing Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw last week was almost comically bad and almost comically badly received as well. So really this week's Raw should have had basically a clean sweep. They should have been able to just slide on through basically under the radar. An average show would have been a considerable improvement here, and for most of this Raw that is exactly what we got. Until that finish. My word. I'm PCW's Tom Colhue, and this is a Monday Night Raw review. Be sure to click like, subscribe if you haven't, and let's jump in. WWE Raw started by remembering that they have a tag division. All of the available tag teams were in the ring at once, with the exception of one that we will mention in a moment. Lince Dorado was in the ring solo because Grand Metalik was not available, and they found a way to make that interesting. RK Bro were there, the New Day, the Viking Raiders, and of course Retribution. AJ Styles and Amos came down to the ring to essentially introduce everyone, which was a good way of reminding us who everyone was and essentially suggesting that we're having a bit of a tag team reset. It also allowed AJ Styles and Amos to reset a little bit because a couple of weeks ago they looked like faces. Not so anymore. The final tag team to join the fray, after a fashion, was Miz and Morrison, Hey Hey Ho Ho. Unfortunately, The Miz is currently in a wheelchair after tearing his ACL, a football injury if ever I've heard one, but they did manage to make this entertaining by having Morrison do his slow-mo introduction and The Miz just to start rolling down the ramp. That was pretty funny in slow motion. Morrison would join the match for his team, but he would be one of the first ones eliminated alongside Lince Dorado, leaving only tag teams available. Randy Orton and Matt Riddle went pretty far, but not far enough, with the Viking Raiders getting the opportunity at the end to eliminate Orton, win the match. They will line up against AJ Styles and Amos, likely at Hell in a Cell. Very happy about this. Pretty much exactly what was intended from the moment that the Viking Raiders returned, and this could really put a seal on what's been an okay return so far. Picked up a couple of wins, but they've been missing for a while. Charlotte Flair and Rhea Ripley continued to nag and whine at Sonya Deville and Adam Pearce about something or other, largely Nikki Cross apparently. The end result here was that Charlotte and Rhea Ripley will be teaming against Nikki Cross and a partner of her choosing. Given that the WWE have basically released everyone else, it's probably going to be Asuka. This is incredibly typical of WWE. Oh, 2 women in a championship feud, now they're a tag team. Maybe stop releasing your tag teams and you won't have to make them up as you go along. Elias and Jackson Ryker continued the feud that started last week, and the WWE tried to make me cheer for Jackson Ryker. I didn't. I'm not going to. Our first hour draw segment was a contract signing for the WWE Championship match at Hell in a Cell between Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre, and I feel this was one of the better contract signings we've seen in a while. Really, you had two people at their pinnacle here. Drew McIntyre challenging Bobby Lashley to the Hell in a Cell. Meanwhile, MVP, speaking for Lashley, said that this will be Drew McIntyre's last chance against Lashley. Good storytelling, really puts an end marker on it because we needed that, but also gets us into Hell in a Cell. When Drew McIntyre laid down the challenge, Bobby Lashley simply accepted. We've got a good champion there, someone who's not cowardly whatsoever, and really it's getting harder and harder to think of Bobby Lashley as a heel. In the United States Championship division, Ricochet and Humberto Carrillo wrestled to a draw on a double countout. This means that it is increasingly likely that both will be challenging Sheamus at the pay-per-view in a triple threat match. They were able to show a little bit more edge to Ricochet's character as well as some increased physicality from Humberto Carrillo. It was a good match and actually has helped to develop these characters that little bit more leading into the match with Sheamus. Sheamus at the moment is still suffering from his broken nose, but should be absolutely fine to wrestle at the pay-per-view as long as Carrillo doesn't break his face again. Backstage, Kofi and Xavier Woods were heading back to their locker room when Kofi was interrupted by MVP. Kofi said to Xavier Woods, "Go on ahead," and he did so, leaving MVP to talk to Kofi about Kofi Mania. Essentially, MVP ran him down, saying that he abandoned Kofi Mania rather than Kofi Mania abandoning him, in that he didn't really come after Brock Lesnar afterwards and just settled into the tag division. This is very, very good storytelling and very enjoyable as well. It felt very real how MVP said and spoke about the Kofi Mania win and the championship win, Kofi's reign as a champion, how that influenced MVP to come back after all these years. I did report not long after Kofi lost the championship that there was an idea, or at least a plan in the planning of, to have Kofi get a little bit more serious, a little bit darker and build towards a rematch. this looks like it finally might be starting to happen. I do think that what's actually going to happen here is that once Drew McIntyre loses at Hell in a Cell, we need a challenger for Money in the Bank before Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. Kofi Kingston is pretty much perfect, especially if Brock Lesnar is going to interrupt and attack both men. Eva Marie will be returning to Raw next week, and it's about bloody time. Jeff Hardy actually won a wrestling match, this time against Cedric Alexander. Makes sense that Jeff Hardy, the veteran, will be used to put over Cedric Alexander eventually, so I would imagine they're going to be wrestling for the next couple of weeks at least, building towards one or both of them being in the Money in the Bank ladder match. The third hour draw segment featured Charlotte Flair as usual, this time pairing with Rhea Ripley against Nikki Cross and indeed Asuka. And Nikki Cross and Asuka were treated as a major afterthought here the entire time, despite the fact that because of Charlotte and Rhea Ripley essentially picking fights with each other, Nikki Cross was able to pin Rhea Ripley to win the match for her team. I like that Nikki Cross is being used, but she is such an afterthought in the booking. She's just keeping them apart so they can have more matches later. I think it also needs pointing out that Charlotte Flair and Rhea Ripley are essentially resulting in Charlotte Flair being elevated even further and Rhea Ripley losing a lot of matches. We've got another Shayna Baszler on our hands at the moment, and she's the actual champion this time. Mansoor defeated Drew Gulak in short order with a handful of the tights. This was suggested by commentary as Mansoor listening to Mustafa Ali, who he spoke to earlier on in the day. I like where they're going with this feud, I like this concept, and I'm really quite excited to see how it ends, considering it looks like it's going to be a long-term, slower build. In our final wrestling match of the night, it was Kofi Kingston against Matt Riddle, despite the fact both of them had already wrestled at least once that night. We had that on SmackDown as well with people doing double duty. I think these releases are actually having a direct impact. With Xavier Woods distracting Matt Riddle, Randy Orton would come down to try and even those odds and get attacked by Kofi Kingston, would return the favour not by attacking Kingston but by attacking Woods. This would create a lot of intrigue outside the ring. Eventually, however, I would call this a clean win, with Matt Riddle distracted by being too Randy Orton before Kofi Kingston would pick up the win over him with Trouble in Paradise. This is finally one for the New Day that could have been influenced by MVP and of course could have been influenced heavily by Randy Orton. Lot of moving parts in this feud, it's been very interesting so far. Finally, in our main event segment, Shayna Baszler, the most legitimized combat athlete currently active in the company, ran away from a doll when it basically attacked her with pyro. She stomped on Lily in the ring, ran away, then hid in a room with a cameraman, saw Lily in a mirror, it was very Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan, broke the mirror, and Lily was still there, and then it ended. This was awful. I don't mind a bit of the Undertaker Lightning business or the Bray Wyatt Fiend character, but you've got to be working with the right people. Undertaker had Kane, Bray Wyatt sometimes had Undertaker, and a lot of people had Roman Reigns who can genuinely work both sides very easily. Shayna Baszler does not work the spooky side very well. Alexa Bliss does, but she needs the right opponent, and there isn't one in the women's division. Maybe Sasha Banks could fill that, but I definitely don't see it for Shayna Baszler. Ideally, I would suggest that this will result in Alexa Bliss challenging Rhea Ripley at SummerSlam, with this being the continued elevation of Bliss going forwards. We only briefly saw Nia Jax saying to Shayna Baszler, take Bliss seriously, which was a silly thing to say considering Nia Jax never took Bliss seriously in the entire career. There were some positives about Raw this week, some real positives, and some things which genuinely show intrigue going forwards. RK Bro continued to be a very interesting story told. The Viking Raiders now get their chance against AJ Styles on Omos. We've seen Nikki Cross get pushed, kind of, even if she's a complete afterthought, and there's good stuff going on with the United States Championship division. The bad, however, continues to outweigh the good, particularly as regards the Raw Women's Championship feud, where Rhea Ripley is just losing constantly, and in fact everything going on with Alexa Bliss. The women's division at the moment is dragging down the show, and that's not because of a lack of talent in the women's division, that's because it's been terribly written. I've been Tom Collahue for PCW, thank you very much for joining me. Let me know what you thought of Raw down in the comments, and I will see you next time.